You want to know something? I've been doing this job for a long time, a long time. And in all those years, through all the sets and all the cities and all the late nights waiting for the light to hit just right, I've had some moments that I genuinely cannot explain. Moments where I look back and think, how did I survive that with my dignity mostly intact? Mostly. This is one of those moments. It started on the set of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin's film. Now, if you've never worked with Quentin Tarantino, let me paint the picture. The man creates this entire world, not just a set, a world. You show up and you're not Leonardo DiCaprio anymore. You're Rick Dalton, fading television actor, 1,969, slightly drunk, slightly terrified, and deeply, deeply insecure. So I'm already in this strange headspace where I'm supposed to be a man who is charming but failing, suave but crumbling. That's the character. That's what I was living in every single day. And then there's Margot. I had worked with Margot before The Wolf of Wall Street. She played Naomi, my wife, and let me tell you, she showed up on that film and just demolished every scene she was in. There's something about the way she works. She arrives completely prepared, completely present, and then she does something you didn't expect, and suddenly you're not acting anymore. You're genuinely reacting. She has that gift. Not everyone does. She does. So I already knew she was extraordinary. What I did not fully account for was how that would play out when we were spending 12, 14 hours a day together on a film that was essentially about the relationship between these two characters. Rick and Cliff and Sharon, this triangle of people orbiting each other in the last gasps of old Hollywood. And Sharon Tate, the way Margot played her, was just pure joy, pure, radiant, uncomplicated joy. In a film full of melancholy and nostalgia, she was the light. Now, I want to be clear about something. When you're deep in a production, when you're living inside a character for months, there is a blurring that happens. The lines between you and the person you're playing get soft. Rick Dalton had this very particular energy with women. He was a man out of time. He knew how to do the old Hollywood thing, the charm, the swagger, the line delivered with that slightly self-aware smirk. And sometimes on set, you stop separating what's Rick and what's Leo, and it all just becomes one slightly embarrassing, continuous performance. There was an afternoon, I remember it perfectly because I've replayed it approximately 11,000 times since, where we had a break in shooting. We were between setups, waiting for the camera crew to work through a complicated dolly move. And Margot and I were just sitting, just talking. The way you do on long shoots, you find these pockets of time and you fill them with conversation. And we were talking about the old movies, about the films that made both of us want to do this. And she mentioned something, some old screwball comedy from the 40s, and I leaned over and I said, with what I can only describe as peak Rick Dalton energy, I said something along the lines of, they don't make women like that anymore. And I meant it as a compliment. I genuinely meant it as a compliment about the actresses of that era, about the Barbara Stanwicks and the Katharine Hepburns. That's what I meant. That is not what came out. What came out was this extremely loaded, extremely old-fashioned, slightly creepy compliment that landed somewhere between a 1,962 Rat Pack member and a man who had been spending too many hours inhabiting a character from that exact era. And there was this pause, this 3-second pause that felt like it lasted the entire production. And then Margot just started laughing. Not a polite laugh, not a courtesy laugh, a full, genuine, delighted laugh, the kind that starts in the stomach and takes over the whole body. And she looked at me with this expression that was equal parts affection and absolute disbelief. And she said, "Oh my God, Leo, just Leo, that's all. Oh my God, Leo." And here's the thing, here's what made it worse. Because I was so deep in Rick Dalton, my instinct was not to laugh it off the way a normal person would. My instinct was to double down. Rick would double down. Rick, when something wasn't landing, would try harder, with more conviction, as if volume and sincerity could rescue a sinking ship. So I did something that I still find it difficult to talk about without covering my face. I made it worse. I leaned back. I looked at her with what I can only imagine was an expression of maximum misplaced confidence, and I said something like, "I mean that as the highest possible compliment," which made her laugh harder. And now Brad Pitt had appeared from somewhere, the way Brad does, materializing from off camera at exactly the wrong moment. And he took one look at my face and her laughter, and he just said, "What did you do?" And sat down to watch. I want you to understand the dynamic here. Brad Pitt watching you fail is a particular experience because Brad is one of the most effortlessly cool human beings on the planet, and he does not need to say anything. He just exists in a state of such complete and natural ease that his mere presence in your peripheral vision when you are doing something deeply uncool is deeply, deeply humiliating. He wasn't laughing at me. He was observing me scientifically, like a naturalist who had just come across an unusual bird behavior. So now Margot is laughing, Brad is watching, and I have committed to my position so thoroughly that the only move available to me is to see it through to its inevitable conclusion. I kept going. I genuinely kept going. I think I said something about how the great ones always had this quality of being completely themselves, and that Margot had that quality, and that if we had made movies in 1945, she would have been one of the greats. Silence. Then Margot said, "Are you doing Rick right now?" And I honestly did not know how to answer that question because I genuinely was not sure. The whole thing collapsed into laughter at that point. The three of us just sitting there laughing, me mostly laughing at myself because what else do you do? Brad said something I will not repeat because it was too accurate. Margot at one point put her hand on my arm and said, "It was very sweet," which is the thing you say to someone when what you really mean is it was absolutely not what you thought it was, but you are a good person and I like you. That is the specific energy of that conversation. Sweet. I am a grown man. I have been nominated for the Academy Award multiple times. I have worked with Scorsese, with Spielberg, with Nolan, and the word that Margot Robbie chose to describe my most heartfelt attempt at being charming was sweet. I have thought about this in the years since. I've thought about what it means. And I think what it means is that acting is a very strange profession that does things to you. You spend so much time constructing characters, so much time thinking about how a person moves and speaks and carries themselves, that you can lose track of the line between performing and just being. And sometimes in unguarded moments, the performance leaks. Rick Dalton leaked. Rick Dalton, with his dated charm and his desperate sincerity, leaked out into a conversation on a film set in Los Angeles and delivered what was objectively a very confusing compliment to one of the most talented actresses working today. And she laughed. She really genuinely laughed, not at me exactly, more at the situation, at the delightful absurdity of the whole thing. And honestly, looking back, I think that laugh is one of my favorite things that has ever happened on a set, because there's something very honest about it, something unscripted and real. We spend so much time in the constructed version of things, the written version, the rehearsed version, that the moments where something just happens, something genuinely unrehearsed, those are the ones you carry with you. Quentin, when he heard about it later, because of course Brad told him immediately, was delighted. Quentin has this thing where he collects those moments. The weird thing that happened between takes, the conversation that went sideways, the human stuff underneath the performance. He said something about how that was very Rick of me, which is the kind of note that makes you feel seen and slightly mortified simultaneously. Margot, to her enormous credit, never made me feel bad about it. That's the thing about her. That's what makes her so good to work with and so good to be around. She takes the work seriously and takes the people seriously and doesn't take the status of any of it seriously at all. She was never going to let me be weird about something that was at its core just funny. She just laughed and moved on, and the next morning showed up with the same complete professionalism she always has. And at some point during the day, she walked past me and said, "How are the great ones doing today?" and kept walking without breaking stride, which was, I have to admit, a devastating and perfect response. I think about that a lot when people ask me about chemistry, about what makes two people work on screen together. And I always want to say it's not what you think. It's not some mystical quality that exists in the writing or the direction, although those matter enormously. It's the stuff that happens in the margins, the conversation on the break that goes sideways, the moment where someone laughs at the right time, the way a person receives something unexpected and responds with genuine warmth rather than performance. That's what chemistry is. It's just two people being real with each other. Margot is real with you. That's the thing. She's completely, absolutely real. And there's something about that realness that makes you want to be real back, even when being real means admitting that you temporarily lost track of where your character ended and you began. And you delivered what was essentially a 1960s pickup line to your co-star while your other co-star watched with quiet scientific interest. If you ever meet Brad Pitt, do not bring this up. He will confirm everything and add details that I have deliberately omitted. He has a very accurate memory for other people's embarrassing moments and absolutely no impulse control about sharing them. Margot, if you ever somehow hear this, it was a compliment. It was always a compliment. You are one of the greats. Even if the delivery left something to be desired, and the laughter, her laughter in that moment, honest and warm and completely uncontrolled, is something I still think about. It's the kind of laugh that reminds you why any of this is worth doing. Not the awards, not the reviews, not the films themselves, but these small, human, unscripted moments between people who are trying to make something real together. That's the job. All the rest of it is just waiting for the light to be right.